Welcome, everyone! Today, we're diving into a what-if scenario set in the Naruto universe. The story is called Naruto Copy System by Dragon NX. If you're intrigued by this amazing tale, be sure to check out the full story through the link in the description. Shin closed his eyes. After using the advanced replication card to copy Ryota's Manjiki Sharingan, his eyes stung. He could feel the immense ocular power surging within him, pushing past his limits. It was like staying up for days without sleep. After about a minute, a soothing coolness spread through his eyes. His Manjiki Sharingan's pattern shifted, evolving into the eternal Manjiki Sharingan. His ocular power, already greater than that of most Manjiki Sharingan users, increased tenfold. It felt limitless. "Shin, are you all right?" Kushina and Mikoto asked worriedly, seeing him suddenly close his eyes. "I'm fine," Shin said with a smile, reassuring them. He was more than fine. He felt amazing. The evolution of his Sharingan had brought about a significant transformation. His already vast chakra reserves increased further. He even felt physically stronger. This was understandable. The evolution of the Sharingan enhanced the user's chakra and physical abilities. And his perfect sage body synergized perfectly with the Sharingan. With both the perfect sage body and the eternal Manjiki Sharingan, he might even be able to awaken the Rinnegan on his own. He didn't know if he needed Indra Anujura's chakra for that, though. If he did, it would be troublesome. But it was too early to think about that. He had just awakened the eternal Manjiki Sharingan, the Rinnegan was still a distant goal. Amaterasu and Kagutsuchi. The same as Susukacha's. Shin muttered to himself. He had copied Ryota's Manjiki Sharingan, including his abilities. Ryota's abilities were Amaterasu and Kagutsuchi. Shin was a bit disappointed. They weren't bad abilities, but they weren't what he had hoped for. "I thought everyone's Manjiki Sharingan abilities were unique. Why does this guy have the same ones as Sasuke?" Shin was frustrated. He had been hoping for some unique and powerful abilities. The Sharingan was a reflection of the heart. Perhaps Ryota and Sasuke had similar desires. "Shin, what are you muttering about? That guy's leaving." Kushina's words snapped him out of his thoughts. Shin glanced at Ryota, who was indeed leaving. He had achieved his goal, there was no need to attack Ryota. But he wasn't going to let Ryota go that easily. They had a history, after all. Shin had a good memory. Can't let him escape. "Follow him," Shin said to Kushina and Mikoto. "But we haven't finished eating," Kushina complained. "We can eat later. We'll have something even better after this. Let's go." Shin dragged Kushina along, and Mikoto followed. Shin wasn't trying to hide, and Ryota, being cautious, noticed them. "More flies buzzing around, who?" Ryota scoffed, then headed towards the forest outside the village. He was being hunted by many, he didn't want to cause a commotion. He would deal with them in the forest. Ryota waited in the forest. Shin didn't bother hiding. With the eternal Manjiki Sharingan, there was no need to sneak around to deal with Ryota. That would be embarrassing. "Three brats? I think I've seen you before." Ryota glared at Shin, Kushina, and Mikoto. "Shin, I want revenge," Kushina said. She hadn't forgotten how Ryota had intimidated her with his killing intent. She was vindictive. This was her chance for revenge. "Okay, I'll help you," Shin agreed. Ryota's strongest asset was his Manjiki Sharingan, but it was nothing to Shin. How effective could the Manjiki Sharingan be when suppressed by the eternal Manjiki Sharingan? Besides, Shin already knew Ryota's abilities. Know yourself, know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. "Shin, be careful of his Manjiki Sharingan abilities," Mikoto warned. She didn't know that Shin already knew Ryota's abilities. Fire style, Fireball Jutsu. A massive fireball, over 10 meters in diameter, shot towards them. Ryota had mastered this jutsu. The fireball collided with an ice wall. Shin's ice wall was far stronger than Ryota's fireball jutsu. The flames melted the ice slightly, but it would take 10 more fireballs to break through. Ice release? Aren't you an Uzumaki? Ryota was surprised. He vaguely remembered Shin and Kushina being Uzumaki. Can't an Uzumaki use ice release? An Uzumaki can even use the Sharingan. Shin activated his 3-tomo Sharingan. Ryota was stunned. Ice release was one thing, but the Sharingan? That was impossible. The Sharingan was a bloodline limit, a Kekkei Genkai. It could be transplanted, but a transplanted Sharingan couldn't be deactivated. Ryota knew this. Shin's Sharingan wasn't transplanted, it was his own. How can you have the Sharingan? Ryota asked. Why should I answer that? Ryota didn't press further. There was no point. He activated his Manjiki Sharingan. He was serious now. Shin's display of ice release and the Sharingan had forced him to take Shin seriously. Ryota's Manjiki Sharingan had a pattern of 3 connected sickles, similar to Obito's. Mikoto felt a wave of pressure. Shin, his Manjiki Sharingan is completely different from yours. Kushina exclaimed, staring at Ryota's eyes. Every Manjiki Sharingan is unique. Just like no 2 snowflakes are the same. Shin explained. The abilities might be the same, but the pattern was always unique. Well, except for the one Shin copied. His system could create perfect replicas. You have the Manjiki Sharingan too. Ryota overheard Kushina's exclamation and stared at Shin in disbelief. A 3-tomo Sharingan at his age was shocking enough, but the Manjiki Sharingan? Ryota couldn't believe it. As for the eternal Manjiki Sharingan, he didn't even know what that was. No, mine is more advanced. The eternal Manjiki Sharingan. It's not the same as yours. The difference is greater than that between a 3-tomo Sharingan and the Manjiki Sharingan. The perfect Susanoo can level a mountain with a single swing. The Susanoo you can use is nothing compared to that. So you have the Manjiki Sharingan too. Ryota's killing intent surged, ignoring Shin's claim of a more advanced Sharingan. To him, the Manjiki Sharingan was the ultimate evolution of the Sharingan. There was nothing beyond it. I bet you're thinking of killing me and taking my eyes, right? Is your vision starting to blur? How did you know? Ryota, who had been about to attack, stopped, his eyes wide with surprise. It's the side effect of the Manjiki Sharingan. You must have overused its abilities. If you didn't use the Manjiki Sharingan's abilities and only used it as a normal Sharingan, you wouldn't go blind. But who could resist using the Manjiki Sharingan's powers? And its abilities were powerful, at least A-rank level. You seem to know a lot about the Manjiki Sharingan, Ryota said, his killing intent intensifying. More than you. Ryota attacked without hesitation, unleashing Amaterasu. Amaterasu created inextinguishable black flames. It didn't require hand seals, couldn't be extinguished with water, could burn in a vacuum, and wouldn't disappear until its target was completely incinerated. It seemed powerful, but its biggest flaw was that it had never killed anyone in the original story. Well, except for White Zetsu, but those weren't human. And it was the same this time. The moment Ryota unleashed Amaterasu, Shin activated his eternal Manjiki Sharingan and used Kagutsuchi. Kagutsuchi could control the shape of the Amaterasu flames. Ryota's flames were now under Shin's control. Kagutsuchi? You have Kagutsuchi too? Ryota's face turned grim. If he had known Shin also had Kagutsuchi, he wouldn't have used Amaterasu. Shin didn't answer. He shaped the Amaterasu flames into a blade and slashed at Ryota. If this blade connected, Ryota would be finished. Amaterasu might not have killed anyone in the original story, but that didn't mean it was weak. The people it was used against were simply too strong. If Amaterasu could instantly kill anyone, there would be no story. Ryota also used Kagutsuchi, trying to regain control of the flames. But his Manjiki Sharingan was no match for Shin's eternal Manjiki Sharingan. Slash! Ryota's arm was severed, and Amaterasu flames engulfed his body. The severed arm was quickly incinerated, but Ryota managed to extinguish the flames on his body. Tears of blood streamed from his eyes. Unlike Shin, using his Mangekyou Sharingan abilities came at a cost. Just like Itachi Uchiha, every time he used his Mangekyou Sharingan, he would bleed from his eyes. Ryota's vision blurred further, but that didn't matter. He had lost an arm. Using your own jutsu against you. Not bad. Shin smiled. Mikoto, see? This is the consequence of using the Mangekyou Sharingan's abilities. It's a double-edged sword. Shin said this to warn Mikoto, to prevent her from overusing her Mangekyou Sharingan when she awakened it. The more she used it, the faster she would go blind. Mikoto nodded. She hadn't understood the side effects before, seeing Shin use his Mangekyou Sharingan without any problems. Shin had mentioned the side effects, but she hadn't witnessed them firsthand. Now she had. Your Mangekyou Sharingan can evolve? Ryota stared at Shin, his eyes filled with disbelief. Seeing Shin's more complex Sharingan pattern, he was starting to believe it. He could also feel the pressure, the overwhelming ocular power. His own paled in comparison. You're already a dead man. You don't need to know that much, Shin said calmly. Some people were alive, but they were already dead. Ryota was one of them. Shin had decided to kill him. With Shin's strength, Ryota was no match for him. Ryota was only quasi-Kage level, his strength boosted by his Mangekyou Sharingan. Shin looked at Ryota with cold eyes. Ryota was enraged. Did this brat really think he had him cornered? Susanoo! Ryota roared, activating his Mangekyou Sharingan's ultimate ability. Having lost an arm, he had no choice but to use Susanoo. He gritted his teeth as pain surged through his body. This was the side effect of overusing the Mangekyou Sharingan. Not only did his eyes bleed, but his entire body ached. The Susanoo was powerful, but using it with the Mangekyou Sharingan came at a steep price. Itachi Uchiha's illness was partly due to his overuse of the Mangekyou Sharingan. The eternal Mangekyou Sharingan could use the Susanoo without any side effects, but using it with the regular Mangekyou Sharingan was like burning away one's lifespan. The Susanoo was a life-consuming jutsu. It devoured not only the enemy's life force, but also the user's. Unless you had the Sage Body, that is. The Sage Body was truly versatile. With a strong body, you could do anything. The Sharingan's abilities might seem impressive, but they were ultimately inferior to the Sage Body. Indra Tsutsuki couldn't defeat Azura Tsutsuki. Madara Uchiha couldn't defeat Hashirama Senju. Sasuke Uchiha couldn't defeat Naruto Uzumaki. Ryota didn't have the Sage Body, not even an ordinary one. He was paying the price with his life force. A skeletal, armored warrior materialized, reaching a height of almost 50 meters. That Susanoo is pathetic. Let me show you what a real Susanoo looks like. Shin looked at the incomplete Susanoo, then activated his own. He didn't need the perfect Susanoo to defeat Ryota, but he wanted to test its power. The Susanoo had a lot of potential. The perfect Susanoo wasn't even its final form. Hagoromo Tsutsuki's Susanoo was comparable in size to the Ten Tails. Shin's black Susanoo towered over 100 meters tall. Shin stood within the black crystal on its forehead. He wasn't alone. Kushina and Mikoto were also there. That Susanoo was already impressive, but compared to yours, it's like a child. Kushina said, staring at Ryota's Susanoo, which barely reached Shin's Susanoo's waist. That's an incomplete Susanoo. I told you, the Mangekyou Sharingan can't manifest the true Susanoo. Shin grinned. He wondered what Ryota was thinking now. I bet he's feeling despair, Mikoto said. Probably. I would be, Kushina agreed. Ryota's small Susanoo was no match for Shin's. They weren't even on the same level. Ryota was indeed feeling despair. He hadn't expected the Susanoo to be capable of reaching such a size. He had thought his own Susanoo was already at its limit. Shin's Susanoo drew a sword from its back. The perfect Susanoo had wings and could fly. Let's test the power of the perfect Susanoo. Shin locked onto Ryota and swung his sword. The blade was longer than Ryota's Susanoo. The air rippled from the force of the attack. Ryota's Susanoo drew two curved swords, trying to block Shin's attack. Don't overestimate yourself. The perfect Susanoo isn't just about size. Shin felt Ryota was being naive. He clearly didn't understand the true power of the perfect Susanoo. Shin's sword sliced through Ryota's swords like butter, then cleaved through Ryota's Susanoo. There was no resistance. Ryota's Susanoo was split in two. The shockwave rippled outwards, splitting the forest. Basically, Madara's iconic scene where he unleashed his perfect Susanoo against the 5 Koge and obliterated mountains. Kushina and Mikoto stared at the destruction in awe. Was this the power of the perfect Susanoo? Shin wasn't surprised. The Susanoo was incredibly powerful, and he hadn't even used his full strength. Is Ryota dead? Mikoto asked, looking at the massive chasm Shin had created. No, he's still alive, Shin said. He's still alive? After that attack? Kushina was surprised. Was Ryota that strong? No, I let him live. I missed on purpose. Shin had deliberately aimed off-center, sparing Ryota's life. But he had still almost killed Ryota. If Ryota hadn't reacted quickly, he would be dead. Shin wasn't sparing Ryota out of kindness. He wanted Ryota's Manjiki Sharingan. He deactivated his Susanoo, then used Yomotsu Hirasaka to teleport in front of the fleeing Ryota. Trying to run away? That's not very polite, Shin said calmly. What do you want? Ryota asked, his eyes filled with blood and tears. He had just used the Susanoo, his vision was blurry. He could barely see Shin. His body ached from the strain of using the Susanoo, and his chakra was almost depleted. Although his Susanoo had been destroyed, the cost had already been paid. To kill you and take your eyes, Shin said bluntly. Ryota's Manjiki Sharingan was nearing blindness, but it was still valuable. If it weren't for his eyes, Shin would have killed him with the Susanoo. You want my Manjiki Sharingan? Ryota's face twisted in anger. You want my Manjiki Sharingan? Dream on. I'd rather destroy them than give them to you. Ryota glared at Shin with hatred. Destroy them? Go ahead then. Unless you don't have the guts. Shin looked at Ryota calmly. He didn't believe Ryota would destroy his own eyes. He was probably still hoping to escape. Shin, did you catch him? Kushina and Mikoto arrived, using the body flicker jutsu. Ryota's eyes flashed as he saw them. He lunged at the girls, hoping to take them hostage. Alas, he was underestimating them. If he were at full strength, Kushina and Mikoto wouldn't stand a chance against him, even together. But Ryota was exhausted. His ocular power was almost depleted, and his Manjiki Sharingan was barely active. His chakra was also low from using the Susanoo. He had lost an arm and couldn't even form hand seals to use ninjutsu. His current strength was less than that of an average Genin. Kushina and Mikoto threw kunai at Ryota, each with an explosive tag attached. Boom! Ryota was forced back by the explosions. Fire style, Great Dragon Fire Jutsu. Mikoto unleashed a fire dragon, shattering the surrounding trees. Damn it! Ryota cursed. These kids were strong. At their age, he had only been a chunin. He couldn't use jutsu, so he dodged the fire dragon. But the attack's range was wide. He was caught in the blast, suffering burns and crashing to the ground. Rasengan! Kushina appeared before him, a Rasengan aimed at his chest. The Rasengan pierced through Ryota's body, creating a gaping hole. Blood splattered the ground. Ryota's eyes widened in shock. Kushina quickly retreated, wary of a last-ditch attack. That blow should have destroyed his heart, but she wasn't taking any chances. Shin and Tsunade had taught her to be cautious. He's dead. Shin approached and confirmed Ryota's death. His heart had been destroyed. Even Madara Ucha would die from that. Well, The current Madara, not the Six Paths Madara. Six Paths Madara was practically immortal. Even if his heart was destroyed, he could regenerate. Ryota's eyes were wide open, filled with regret. He hadn't even gotten his revenge on Dan's. And he regretted not destroying his eyes. This might be a bit gruesome. You can look away if you want, Shin said to Kushina and Mikoto. Gruesome? Kushina looked at him, puzzled. Yeah, his Manjiki Sharingan might be almost depleted, but it's still valuable. Kushina and Mikoto understood. He was going to take Ryota's eyes. What's so gruesome about that? We'll watch. Kushina didn't think it was a big deal. They had seen worse on the battlefield. Fine. Shin didn't argue. He removed Ryota's eyes and placed them in a jar filled with saline solution. A pair of Manjiki Sharingan. Shin was pleased. He wouldn't admit that this was one of the reasons he had killed Ryota. He looked at Ryota's mangled body, then sealed it in a scroll. You're not even letting the body go? Mikoto said, surprised. I'm not letting it go. I'm recycling. It might be useful later, Shin retorted. He had initially planned to incinerate the body, but he changed his mind. Ryota's body could be used for the Edo Tensei. The Edo Tensei required the target's DNA and a living sacrifice. It was a cruel jutsu, a testament to the second Hokage's ruthlessness. Let's go, Shin said. Shin, I killed him. I killed an S-rank missing nin. Kushina said excitedly as they left. Don't get too excited, Kushina. If Shin hadn't weakened him, you wouldn't have stood a chance, Mikoto said. Mikoto, shouldn't you be praising me? Kushina glared at Mikoto, then asked suspiciously, are you jealous? There's nothing to be jealous of. I'm just trying to keep you grounded, Mikoto said. Mikoto, do you think I'm the type to get a big head? Yes. Shin answered before Mikoto could. I'm not talking to either of you anymore. Kushina stomped off ahead, leaving Shin and Mikoto behind. Shin and Mikoto exchanged amused glances. Kushina, seeing this, slowed down and walked between them. Are we going back now? Mikoto asked Shin. Yeah, we came here for Ryota. Now that is dealt with, let's go back. Back to the Land of Rain? I don't like that place, Kushina grumbled. The gloomy weather was depressing. Even the people of the Land of Rain hated it. 2 days later, Shin and his team returned to the Land of Rain. Since the last battle, there had only been minor skirmishes between Konoha and the Tsunarame forces. These skirmishes involved small teams of shinobi disrupting supply lines and assassinating key personnel. Dans had left the Suna front and gone to the Iwa front, where Hiruzen was struggling. Hiruzen, despite his strength, was having a hard time against the third Tsukikage, Noaki. Noaki, despite his small stature, was a powerful shinobi. He also had the Kekkei dust release, which could disintegrate anything it touched. And he had the support of Rushi, the Four Tails Jinkriki. Rushi and Noaki might not get along, but they were united against Konoha. Hiruzen couldn't handle it, so he had sent for Dans and put Sakumo Hatake in charge of the Suna front. Shin and his team didn't see Tsunade or Konan when they returned. They must be at the medical tent. At the medical tent, Shin found Konan. Shin-ni, you're back. Konan's eyes lit up, and she ran towards Shin. She only sees Shin. How heartless, Mikoto said with a pout. I even taught you how to refine chakra, Konan. You're so ungrateful, Kushina added. Mikoto Nichan, Kushina Nichan. Konan greeted them sweetly, then went back to Shin, making Kushina even more jealous. You're back. What mission were you on? Tsunade emerged from the medical tent. Shin hadn't told her where he was going. Nothing much. Just dealt with a missing nin. Anything happen here? Nothing major. Suna and AME have only been sending small teams to harass us. No major battles. Tsunade shook her head, then looked at Shin curiously. He had time to deal with a missing nin? Since I'm here, I might as well practice my medical ninjutsu, Shin said. He hadn't had a chance to use the mystical palm jutsu since learning it from Tsunade. Now was the perfect opportunity. There were plenty of injured shinobi here. Don't do anything reckless, Tsunade warned. Don't worry. You don't think I'll kill them with the mystical palm jutsu, do you? 2 months passed. Shin celebrated another birthday. He was 11 now. The system gifted him a common replication card, which he used to copy the physique of a taijutsu master, further enhancing his physical abilities. Shin had a dream, to defeat 6 Paths Madara with taijutsu. With the system's help, it wasn't just a dream, it was a real possibility. Perhaps in the future, he would find this dream too small. During those 2 months, there were dozens of skirmishes between Konoha and the Tsunade forces. Konoha won every time. And Hans was practically traumatized by Shin. Shin had defeated him so many times that Hans was now terrified of him. Suna was still holding on, refusing to surrender. The cost of surrender was too high. As for a mega cure, if even Suna couldn't afford to surrender, they definitely couldn't. But thanks to their alliance with a mega cure, they had the advantage of familiarity with the terrain. Do you have a plan? We don't want to die with you. Hans confronted the third Kazekage. His tone was harsh. He blamed the Kazekage for dragging him into this mess. But it wasn't entirely the Kazekage's fault. Hans had been tempted by the rewards offered. I sent a message to Noaki, but that old fox said they're struggling themselves and can't spare any forces. The Kazekage said angrily. According to the intel, Noaki was currently overwhelming Konoha. They were far from struggling. He simply didn't want to help Suna. Their alliance was just a verbal agreement, it could be broken at any time. Hans glared at the Kazekage. This Kazekage was too naive. He shouldn't have joined this war for a bit of profit. Now he was stuck. Don't you have any other plans? Hans asked. If the Kazekage couldn't come up with a viable plan, Hans would have to prepare for a Megacure's withdrawal. Our sealing team has finally released Bunpuku from that seal. He can rejoin the battle now. Do you think one Jinkriki can defeat Konoha? Have you forgotten how he was captured in the first place? Hans' frown deepened. This Kazekage was unreliable. Ibizo has sent a letter to Kumogakure, inviting them to join us. If Kumo joins the war, Konoha will be forced to divide their forces. Hans hadn't expected the Kazekage to try and enlist Kumo's help. But would it work? The Kage weren't idiots. Could Suna really convince Kumo to attack Konoha? The third Reikage wouldn't do it without a good reason. What could Suna possibly offer? How confident are you that you can convince the third Reikage? Hans asked. This was important. It would determine his next move. I'm 80% sure I can convince Kumo to join the war, the Kazekage said confidently. Hans was skeptical, but he chose to believe him for now. After Hans left, the Kazekage sighed. 80%? He didn't even have 20% confidence. But he knew that if he told the truth, Hans would have second thoughts. So he had to act confident. He had successfully deceived Hans for now. But after Hans left, the Kazekage started to worry. Defeating Konoha was proving to be difficult. He didn't have any good options. Noaki, what a surprise to see you on the battlefield. Shin was surprised to see Noaki at the logistics base. It had been a while. I'm here to escort supplies. I'm so jealous of you, getting to stay on the battlefield. Noaki looked at Shin with envy. What's there to be envious about? Don't you know how dangerous it is? People die every day. Go take a look at the medical tent. It's full of injured shinobi. Shin was speechless. What was there to be envious about? If he wasn't strong, he would avoid the battlefield at all costs. Noaki, on the other hand, was weak and yet eager to join the fight. Noaki, why are you doing this kind of mission? Escorting supplies is dangerous, maybe even more so than fighting. Shin was friends with Noaki, and they were practically family, considering Tsunade. He didn't want Noaki to die like in the original story. Shouldn't a shinobi grow through trials? What's a little danger? Noaki said. That's a good attitude, but you should save that speech for your sister. Shin pointed at Tsunade, who was approaching with a frown. Noaki, what are you doing here? Tsunade demanded. You guys talk. I'm going to train. Shin ignored Noaki's pleading look and left. He'd rather train than watch Tsunade lecture Noaki. He went to the forest where he usually trained. Kushina, Mikoto, and Konan were already there. Shin didn't disturb them. He created 1,000 shadow clones and sent them to practice ninjutsu. Some were practicing the jutsu they already knew, while others were developing new ones. Shin himself started researching Sage Mode. To learn Sage Mode, he had to be able to sense natural energy. This wasn't difficult for him. His perfect Sage body made it easy to sense natural energy. He had sensed it within half an hour. But it had been a month since then, and he still hadn't mastered Sage Mode. Do I really need to go to one of the 3 Sage regions to learn this? Shin frowned. Without guidance, relying solely on self-study, it was proving to be difficult. And he couldn't practice recklessly. Sage Mode training was dangerous. To master Sage Mode, he had to balance 3 energies within his body: physical energy, spiritual energy, and natural energy. Each energy had to occupy 1/3 of his total energy to activate Sage Mode. If natural energy exceeded 1/3, he would be consumed by nature. If it was less than 1/3, he couldn't activate Sage Mode. This delicate balance was difficult to achieve, and he couldn't use shadow clones to practice. Even he was struggling, his clones wouldn't be able to do it. He carefully absorbed natural energy, afraid of being consumed. His perfect Sage body had a natural affinity for natural energy, so absorption wasn't the problem. The challenge was in balancing the 3 energies. Shin focused, trying to merge the 3 energies. He failed. He hadn't absorbed enough natural energy. I'll have to take a risk. He created a shadow clone and instructed it to wake him up if he started to lose control. He had been hesitant to absorb too much natural energy before, but now he was willing to take the risk. As long as he stopped in time, he wouldn't be consumed by nature. And as a precaution, he had a shadow clone watching over him. He tried again and failed. This time, he had absorbed too much natural energy. Thankfully, he stopped in time and wasn't affected. But he had learned something valuable. He realized that even if he failed, as long as he stopped in time, there was no danger. He continued experimenting, learning from his mistakes. Finally, before nightfall, he successfully entered Sage Mode. But his Sage Mode was still flawed. It took him 3 minutes to gather enough natural energy to activate it. And he couldn't maintain it for long. It was a far cry from Hashirama Senju's Sage Mode, which could be activated instantaneously and maintained indefinitely. I'll refine it later. Sage Mode was powerful, worth the effort. Senjutsu and the 6 Paths power were probably the strongest forces in the shinobi world. The fact that Senjutsu was effective against the Ten Tails Jinkriki was enough to motivate Shin. Unlike Naruto, who struggled to absorb natural energy, Shin found it easy. Perfecting Sage Mode would be easier for him. Shin, dinner's ready. Kushina called out. Coming. Shin dispelled his clones. The influx of memories and experiences made his head spin. He instinctively activated his eternal Manjiki Sharingan. I can't create that many clones anymore. It's too much. After a few minutes, he recovered, but he felt mentally exhausted. The Shadow Clone Jutsu was a great way to train in ninjutsu, but it wasn't for everyone. Shin felt he was strong enough now. There was no need to push himself so hard. His current strength was undoubtedly beyond Koge level. He might not be as strong as Hashirama Senju, but he was probably close to Madara Uchiha without the Rinnegan. With this strength, he could dominate the entire shinobi world. This is a feast. Looks like Konoha sent some good supplies this time. Shin was surprised by the spread Mikoto had prepared. There were 8 dishes in total.
What are you talking about?
Mikoto and I found these ingredients in the forest with Conan after training, Kushina said.
Oh, that's impressive.
Here, have some more meat. Shin placed some meat in their bowls.
Where's Noaki? Did he leave already?
Shin asked Tsunade. No, his team went to see their sensei. Tsunade shook her head. Noaki had gone to see Orochimaru. She could guess his intentions, he wanted to stay on the battlefield. But that was impossible. She was sure Orochimaru wouldn't allow it. Shin nodded, then dropped the subject. After dinner, he went to rest. Using shadow clones to train in ninjutsu was mentally exhausting. He needed to recover. Perhaps because his Sharingan had evolved into the eternal Manjiki Sharingan, his mental recovery speed had increased. After a night's sleep, he felt refreshed. He ate the breakfast Mikoto had prepared, then decided to continue his training. But just as he was about to leave, Noaki came looking for him. Seeing Noaki's ingratiating smile, Shin took a step back.
Noaki, do you need a favor?
Yeah, how did you know? Noaki looked at Shin in surprise.
It's obvious.
It's practically written all over your face.
What is it?
Nothing too difficult, though.
I can't help with that.
If it was a simple request, he would help, but if it was complicated or troublesome, he'd have to refuse. I want you to convince Sis. I went to see Orochimaru-sensei yesterday, and he said he'd let me stay on the battlefield if Sis agrees.
I can't do that.
Sorry. Shin turned to leave.
Wait. You're my only hope.
Noaki pleaded. First, Tsunade will never agree. Second, I don't think you should stay on the battlefield.
Why not?
You, Kushina, and Mikoto can stay.
Why can't I?
Noaki argued.
Because you're weak.
You'd be cannon fodder on the battlefield.
Do you want to die?
Shin felt like Noaki was an idiot. Did he really think the battlefield was a playground? Don't underestimate me, Shin.
I've gotten a lot stronger.
Noaki said confidently. Noaki had indeed improved recently and was a bit overconfident. That was why he wanted to stay on the battlefield.
Really?
Then let me give you a reality check. If you can last 1 minute against me, I'll convince Tsunade. And I guarantee she'll agree. How about that? Shin, are you looking down on me? Noaki glared at Shin. Don't get cocky. Even if you were 10 times stronger, you wouldn't be able to do it. I suggest you give up. You said it yourself. Don't forget your promise. Noaki suppressed his dissatisfaction. He saw this as an opportunity to stay on the battlefield. Don't worry, I keep my promises. Come on, attack me. I don't have time to waste. Then I won't hold back. Noaki immediately started weaving hand seals. Too slow. I could have killed you a dozen times by now. Shin grabbed Noaki's wrist and twisted it. Noaki couldn't even form hand seals anymore. Trying to use ninjutsu at close range? Don't you know taijutsu is more effective? Shin, let go of me. You're going to break my arm. Noaki gritted his teeth. Shin released him. Go back, Noaki. This isn't the place for you. No. That doesn't count. Let's do it again. Noaki, I don't have time to play with you. But Noaki had already attacked, throwing a punch at Shin. Shin could see that Noaki hadn't trained much in taijutsu. His punches were clumsy and predictable. Before Noaki's fist could connect, Shin sent him flying with a kick. He hadn't used much force, but it was still enough to hurt. See, Noaki? You can't even block a single attack from me. Your chances of survival on the battlefield are 0. If you really want to go, you might as well kill yourself now. Shin's words were harsh, but he had a reason. He had to discourage Noaki, or he might sneak off to the battlefield. Noaki was indeed discouraged. His newfound confidence had been shattered. Shin wasn't worried about him, though. Noaki was similar to Naruto, he'd recover quickly. Noaki got up, dusted himself off, and left dejectedly. What happened to him? Kushina and Mikoto had just arrived and saw Noaki's dejected figure. He wanted to stay on the battlefield and asked me to convince Tsunade. I gave him a reality check. He should give up on that idea for now. Shin shook his head, then went to their usual training spot with Kushina and Mikoto. Konan wasn't with them. She had gone to the medical tent with Tsunade. Shin had finally mastered Sage Mode yesterday. He tried activating it a few times. 3 tomo appeared on his forehead, and red markings spread across his face. He felt like he was entering Sage Mode faster now. Was it just his imagination? He practiced Sage Mode, Taijutsu, and Kenjutsu, while his shadow clones focused on developing and practicing ninjutsu. Time flew by. It was soon lunchtime. Back at the tent, they found Noaki and his teammates, Hayashi and Kai, waiting for them. Shin, we came to say goodbye. We're returning to Konoha, Noaki said. That's good. Noaki, come here. I have something for you. Shin called Noaki over and used the transcription seal on him. This was to prevent him from dying like in the original story. Noaki left the battlefield, but the stalemate between Konoha and the Tsunade forces continued. Konoha had the upper hand, but only because of Shin. Without him, they would be losing. So, the situation remained tense. Konoha didn't dare attack, and neither did Suna and Ame. Meanwhile, at the Konohaiwa front, the situation had stabilized after Danze's arrival. But then, another disaster struck. Kirigakure, the hidden village in the Land of Water, declared war on Konoha. Hiruzen almost tore his hair out when he heard the news. Konoha was already facing 3 villages, 2 great villages and a megacure. Now Kuri was joining? Konoha couldn't handle this. While Hiruzen was panicking, the 3rd Keizukage, the 3rd Tsukikage, and Hans were ecstatic. Hans even went to the Keizukage to ask if he had invited Kiri to join the war. The Keizukage's answer was vague, neither confirming nor denying. Shin was surprised when he heard the news. In the original story, Kiri hadn't participated in the Second Shinobi World War. Was this another butterfly effect caused by him? He was right. Kiri's involvement was directly related to him. He had infiltrated Kirigakure, rampaged with his Susanoo, killed hundreds of their shinobi, stolen their forbidden scroll, and even made off with a large sum of money. Although Kiri had identified the culprit, they couldn't capture Ryota. This caused unrest within the village. The 3rd Mizukage was desperate. He decided to divert attention by declaring war on Konoha. He claimed it was to force Konoha to hand over Ryota, but his true motive was to shift the focus away from his failure to protect the Forbidden Scroll. If he didn't do something, his position as Mizukage would be in jeopardy. And with Konoha facing multiple enemies, it was the perfect opportunity to take advantage of the situation. As expected, after he declared war on Konoha, no one cared about the stolen Forbidden Scroll anymore. The Mizukage personally led a force of 4,000 Kiri shinobi to attack the Land of Fire. Hiruzen was forced to send reinforcements to defend against them. He sent Homura Mitokado and Koharu Utatane, the 2 elders. They weren't as senile as Dan's yet and were still capable fighters. With their leadership, the Konoha forces managed to hold back Kiri's attack for now. This is putting a lot of pressure on Konoha. And Kumogakure hasn't even made a move yet. They had to be wary of Kumo. They were ambitious. If Konoha showed any signs of weakness, the 3rd Reikage would definitely seize the opportunity to attack. He might not just take a bite, he might try to swallow the entire Land of Fire whole. Shin sighed. He had hoped to obtain the Divine Replication card without lifting a finger, but it seemed that wasn't going to happen. No matter what, Konoha has to win. His mission was to ensure Konoha's victory. The reward was a divine replication card. If he failed, he wouldn't get the card. He couldn't be complacent anymore. Konoha might actually lose. Kumo hasn't attacked yet. I wonder if they'll do the same as in the original story and attack Iwa. In the original story, during the First Shinobi World War, Iwa had been attacked by Kumo while fighting Konoha, forcing them to abandon their fight against Konoha to deal with Kumo. But the current war was different. There was no telling what would happen. Perhaps Kumo would attack Konoha instead. After all, Konoha was surrounded by enemies. Kumo might seize the opportunity to strike.
What are you thinking about?
Kushina nudged Shin, snapping him out of his thoughts.
Shin, are you worried about Konoha?
Mikoto asked.
Yeah, things are looking grim.
Looks like it's time for me, the savior, Uzumaki Shin, to step in. Shin said with a smile. Despite the unexpected turn of events, he wasn't worried. With his current strength, he could take on all Forbidden Villages at once. You're not a savior, you're a demon lord. Kushina thought of Shin's perfect Susanoo. That black monstrosity was the embodiment of destruction. Thwack! That's for being a smart aleck. Shin flicked Kushina's forehead. Shin, you meanie. Kushina glared at him, tears welling up in her eyes. That flick had hurt. Kushina, learn your lesson. Remember to say nice things from now on, Mikoto said with a smile. Mikoto, are you laughing at me? Mikoto tried to suppress her laughter, but she couldn't help but smile. She admitted it, she was laughing at Kushina. Mikoto, I'll get you back for this. Kushina threatened. Sorry, Kushina, you'll never get the chance. HMPH, we'll see about that. Here, have an apple. It's rare to find fruit on the battlefield. Shin handed Kushina a large apple. You think you can appease me with a measly apple? Kushina took the apple anyway. Fruit was indeed a rare treat on the battlefield. Shin had used Yomotsu Hirosaka to buy these apples from the Land of Rivers. Hey, where are you going? Kushina asked as Shin left the tent. I'm going to the medical tent to practice medical ninjutsu. Want to come? Shin asked Kushina and Mikoto. Sure, why not? I want to learn medical ninjutsu too, Kushina agreed, following Shin. Mikoto also followed. Kushina, why do you suddenly want to learn medical ninjutsu? Shin asked curiously. It's always good to have more skills. And if Mikoto gets injured, I can heal her. Kushina glanced at Mikoto. Mikoto rolled her eyes. So Kushina was hoping she'd get injured? Shin and his team had just arrived at the medical tent when they heard a series of explosions. What's going on? Is Suna attacking? Shin used his mind's eye of Kagura to sense the situation. It was indeed Suna. He was puzzled. Why were they attacking now? Had they received reinforcements? Tsunade emerged from the medical tent, followed by Conan. What's happening? Is it an enemy attack? Tsunade asked. Let's go see. Conan, stay here. Don't wander off. Shin patted Conan's head. Okay. Conan nodded obediently, though her eyes held a hint of disappointment. Shin wasn't worried about leaving Conan alone. He had implanted his Manjiki Sharingan abilities in her eyes with the transcription seal. He and Tsunade arrived at the edge of the Konoha encampment. Sakumo Hatake was leading the Konoha shinobi in a standoff against the Suna forces. What's going on? Why is Suna attacking? Shin asked Jiraiya, who had recovered from his injuries. Our commander, Sakumo, killed Chiyo's son and daughter-in-law, so she's here for revenge, Jiraiya explained. Shin's expression turned odd. Chiyo's son and daughter-in-law? Weren't they Sasori's parents? So Sasori's parents died during the Second Shinobi World War. Sakumo Hatake. I'll kill you. Chiyo glared at Sakumo with pure hatred. If Ibizo wasn't holding her back, she would have charged at Sakumo. Sakumo's expression remained neutral. killing enemy shinobi was part of his duty, he wouldn't hesitate. The third Keisuke sighed. He hadn't wanted to attack Konoha now, but Chiyo had already mobilized the troops. He had no choice but to go along with it. Chiyo's influence in Suna was almost equal to his. Ibizo, take care of Orochimaru and Jiraiya. Chiyo, Tsunade is yours, try to keep your anger in check. The third Keisuke said, his voice serious. Although this attack was unplanned, he still had a strategy. Sister, once we defeat Konoha, you can do whatever you want with Sakumo, Ibizo said, trying to appease Chiyo. I know. I'll handle Tsunade. Chiyo turned away from Sakumo, suppressing her rage. She couldn't let her emotions control her. Attack! The third Keisuke looked at the monk beside him. This was Bunpuku, the One-Tails Jinkriki. Bunpuku sighed. He didn't want to kill, but he had to fight for Suna. He charged towards the Konoha shinobi, a layer of tailed beast chakra cloaking his body. The tailed beast cloak enhanced the Jinkriki's strength, defense, and speed. Only those who were acknowledged by the tailed beast could use this ability. Bunpuku had clearly earned Shukaku's approval. With the protection of the tailed beast cloak, the kunai and shuriken thrown by the Konoha shinobi couldn't harm Bunpuku. Ichibi, come out! Bunpuku communicated with Shukaku in his mind, then let the tailed beast take over. Shukaku's massive form appeared on the battlefield, causing fear among the Konoha shinobi. That damn Tanuki again, Kushina muttered, glaring at the beast. I'm surprised to see Shukaku here, Shin said. He had sealed Shukaku into Bunpuku with the for symbol seal. Shukaku shouldn't be able to break free on its own. He suspected Suna had broken the seal. He was right. Suna had spent a long time researching ways to forcibly break the for symbol seal. It wasn't a gentle release, Bunpuku had suffered. Attack! The third Keisuke, seeing Shukaku's appearance, immediately targeted Sakumo. Magnet release, iron sand drizzle. He unleashed a torrent of iron sand, forming thousands of senbon that rained down on the Konoha shinobi. Sakumo drew his white light chakra saber and deflected the senbon, then charged towards the Keisuke. His sword now had a special coating that negated the effects of magnet release. Ibizo also attacked, facing Orochimaru and Jiraiya alone. Orochimaru and Jiraiya were only at Quasi-Koge level. Ibizo could handle them both. Chiyo, following the Keisuke's plan, attacked Tsunade with her puppets, occasionally targeting other Konoha shinobi as well. These puppets are so annoying. Tsunade punched a puppet, destroying it, but another one immediately took its place. Sakumo was occupied with the third Keisuke, Orochimaru and Jiraiya with Ibizo, and Tsunade with Chiyo. And now Shukaku had appeared. Only Shin could handle it. Furthermore, Hans hadn't appeared yet. This was the third Keisuke's plan, to keep Konoha's strongest occupied while Hans led the AME shinobi in a sneak attack from behind and destroy their supplies. Shukaku, haven't I beaten you up enough? Still baring your teeth at me? Shin looked at Shukaku, who clearly showed fear in its eyes. It wasn't completely unafraid of him. Shin had indeed given it a thorough beating last time. I'll kill you. Shukaku, feeling insulted, opened its maw and formed a tailed beast bomb. A tailed beast bomb? You can use that too? I thought you didn't have enough chakra. Shin was surprised. But it made sense. All tailed beasts could use tailed beast bombs. Just because Shukaku had less chakra than the others didn't mean it couldn't use it. But it was taking a while to charge. That was understandable, though. It was a powerful attack, capable of destroying an entire village. That was the destructive power of a tailed beast. That was why, even if someone was individually stronger than a tailed beast, their impact on the battlefield was less significant. For example, Hiruzen could defeat Shukaku, but Shukaku's destructive power was far greater. The yin and yang chakra mixed and compressed within Shukaku's mouth, then finally fired outwards. Shukaku felt a sense of satisfaction. It could finally kill this annoying brat. But it was too optimistic. As the tailed beast bomb approached, Shin used his Sharingan. The attack vanished before it could even reach him. After evolving into the eternal Manjiki Sharingan, his abilities had become even stronger. Yomotsu Hirasaka consumed less chakra and was more potent. He could open portals at will. Tenmome could now affect other objects and people, and the time rewind wasn't limited to 3 minutes anymore. Shin had experimented and found he could rewind time by an hour within a 100-meter radius. But the cost was immense. It would deplete all his ocular power and chakra. He could also choose to rewind the time of a single object or person, and the duration would be longer. The length of the rewind depended on how much chakra and ocular power he used. Perhaps with enough chakra and ocular power, he could even rewind time by 1,000 years. But that was just speculation. He had used Tenmome on the tailed beast bomb, rewinding its time by 3 minutes. 3 minutes ago, the tailed beast bomb hadn't even been formed yet. So it simply vanished. Compared to its previous limitations, Tenmome was far more versatile now. In a battle against a true powerhouse, he could use Tenmome to negate their attacks. But for now, Shukaku was confused. It rarely used tailed beast bombs, but it didn't expect its attack to be completely nullified. It quickly realized that the human brat must have done something. But Tenmome's ability was time manipulation, there was no trace of it. Shukaku couldn't understand what Shin had done. Boom! An explosion from the direction of the Konoha camp wiped the smile off Shin's face. So that's why Hans wasn't here. Seeing the flames rising from the Konoha camp, Shin understood Suna and Ame's strategy. He had known that Chiyo was seeking revenge for her son, but he hadn't thought much about Hans's absence. Chiyo's revenge had nothing to do with a Megacure. They might be allies, but Hans wouldn't participate in a battle that offered no benefits to him. Shin had assumed Hans simply didn't want to get involved in Chiyo's personal vendetta. But it seemed the third Kage and Hans had another plan. Looks like I can't play with you anymore, Shukaku. Shin activated his eternal Manjiki Sharingan and took control of Shukaku. Shukaku's eyes turned into 3-Tomo Sharingan. With the eternal Manjiki Sharingan, tailed beasts were just toys. Even with Bunpuku as its Jinkriki, Shin could easily control Shukaku. He glanced at Kushina and Mikoto, who were fighting. They were doing well together. And with the transcription seal, he didn't have to worry too much about them. He left the battlefield and headed back to the Konoha camp. Konan was still there. Although she had the transcription seal, he didn't want her to get hurt. And he also had to deal with the Ame shinobi who were attacking the supply depot. If they destroyed all the supplies, it would put Konoha at a disadvantage. It could even lead to their defeat. He found Konan hiding in their tent. She was unharmed. Konan, are you all right? Shin asked. Konan sighed in relief, then rushed towards Shin and hugged him. She had been terrified by the sounds of battle. I'm fine, she said, shaking her head. That's good. Shin took her hand and left the tent, his Kusanagi sword in his other hand. There were no Ame shinobi here. They were all at the supply depot and the medical tent. They knew what was most important, destroying Konoha supplies and killing their medics. Hans was personally leading the attack. Shin could see the giant salamander wreaking havoc. Konan, are you scared? Shin asked. No. Konan shook her head firmly. She had been scared when she was alone, but now that Shin was here, her fear vanished. Shin smiled and led Konan towards the area with the most Ame shinobi. He cut down everyone he encountered. Konan watched, her fear fading. As a war orphan, she had seen death before. She was becoming desensitized to it. Ice release, ice age. Shin's hands flew through a series of hand seals. An icy chill spread outwards, freezing the fleeing Ame shinobi and extinguishing the fires they had set. Shin's control over ice release had improved significantly. He could now precisely control its range and targets. He was arguably the strongest ice release user in history. Konan, are you cold? Shin asked. Conan nodded, her face slightly red. She was standing on ice, it felt like she was in a frozen wasteland. Shin activated his eternal Manjiki Sharingan and used Amaterasu. Black flames appeared, and he used Kagutsuchi to control them, preventing them from spreading. Warm yourself by the fire, Shin said to Conan. There are black flames? Conan was amazed. She had never seen black flames before. Here you go. Shin didn't attack anymore. The entire camp was frozen. No AME shinobi within its range could escape. Unfortunately, Hans wasn't there. He must have escaped before Shin returned. He must have sensed the danger. Shin hadn't harmed any of his allies, thanks to the mind's eye of Kagura. Without it, he might have frozen his own comrades as well. On the other side of the battlefield, the third Kazekage watched the frozen Konoha camp in shock. Retreat! He didn't hesitate. The Suna forces immediately withdrew. Damn that old hag. I'll catch her this time. Kushina, Mikoto, come help me. Tsunade yelled after defeating Chiyo's puppets. Kushina and Mikoto, who had been busy fighting other Suna shinobi, immediately went to assist Tsunade. But even with their combined efforts, they couldn't capture Chiyo. However, they did manage to destroy her human puppet. She got away. Puppet masters are so annoying. Tsunade punched the remains of the puppet in frustration. Chiyo controlled the puppets from a distance, while she herself remained hidden. Tsunade hated that. Chiyo was strong, but she was still a puppet master. She wouldn't fight Tsunade directly. The Suna forces retreated, and Konoha didn't pursue. Sakumo Hatake ordered them to return to camp. That was an incredible jutsu. I can't believe an 11-year-old can do that. Just how much chakra does that Shin kid have? Jiraiya stared at the frozen camp in awe. Orochimaru, what are you looking at? Orochimaru's eyes were fixed on Shukaku, the one tail. It was still under the control of the Sharingan. The Sharingan? Is the one tail being controlled by the Sharingan? Orochimaru frowned. There were no Ucha on this battlefield. Well, there was Ucha Mikoto. He had almost forgotten about her. Could she be controlling Shukaku? He didn't believe it. He didn't think she was capable of that. If it were Shin, it would be more believable. But how could Shin have the Sharingan? That thing is under control. I'll try to seal it, Kushina said, looking at Shukaku. But Tsunade stopped her. Don't. What if you fail and break Shin's control? Who will deal with the one tail then? Kushina reluctantly backed down. She couldn't even defeat the salamander, Shukaku was out of the question. They left Shukaku alone and returned to the camp, finding Shin and Conan warming themselves by the black flames. Tsunade was curious about the black flames, but Kushina and Mikoto already knew what they were. Mikoto thought of the legendary Amaterasu flames, now used for a campfire. It was a strange sight. Shin stood up and extinguished the flames. Suna retreated? Yes, they retreated. Shin, deal with the one tail outside. Make sure it doesn't cause any trouble, Tsunade said. Okay. Just as Shin was about to leave, Sakumo Hatake arrived. Shin, can you undo your jutsu? Are you kidding me, Sakumo-san? How can I undo a jutsu that's already been cast? Shin said, exasperated. Can't you melt the ice? Our supplies are frozen. I can't do that now. Maybe when my control over ice release improves. Shin said. He really couldn't do it. This is troublesome. Sakumo frowned. Shin's ice was incredibly strong. He had tried to cut it with his white light chakra saber, but it didn't even leave a mark. How long will it take for the ice to melt naturally? Sakumo asked. Shin should know. It might take half a month. There's no sun in the land of rain. Even under direct sunlight, it wouldn't melt easily. We can use fire release to melt it. It'll just take some effort, Shin suggested. That's our only option then. Sakumo left to find some fire release users. Shin went to deal with Shukaku. He wasn't planning on sealing it back into Bunpuku. Instead, he extracted Shukaku completely. Bunpuku, of course, died the moment Shukaku was extracted. Even Uzumaki Jinkriki couldn't survive having a tailed beast extracted. Shukaku, freed from Shin's control, glared at him angrily. Bunpuku was dead. Shukaku had a good impression of Bunpuku. It had even acknowledged him to some extent. That was why it was angry about his death. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this chapter of What If Naruto's Ancestor Had the Copy System? There's so much more to come as Shin's journey unfolds, and if this video gets enough views, the next part will be coming soon. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated. Let me know what you think in the comments, your feedback means a lot. See you in the next one.